You've got this system really that is like, when the Dodgers played the Marlins earlier this year, there was like a $400 million gap in payroll, the most significant, in the history of the sport. And I think that, you're seeing kind of teams pushing the bounds on both sides. And, I think everyone in baseball agrees that this is probably not a great system.
And welcome back to the Sportsnaut Interview. I am your host, Evan Grote, and today we're joined by Andy McCullough, who's a senior writer for The Athletic, and our topic of discussion today is a story that Andy has up on The Athletic right now. I want to get you the title of the story. It is "Which MLB Teams Are Actually Trying? Charting a Divide Between the Haves and the Have-Nots." I read the story. It's a great one. I encourage you all to go out there and do it. Andy, thanks so much for the time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Andy, you make the analogy in the story that spending money and having a high payroll does not guarantee you win a World Series. But it's like playing the lotto. You make the point that the more money you spend, the more tickets you get and the more opportunities you have to win. You got to be in it to win it, as they say with the lotto. But I guess what I want to know from you is, do you think it's gone too far? Have some of these teams gone too far when you look at what the Dodgers have done in recent years, the Mets as well, and of course the Yankees are always among some of the top spenders in the league. How can a league like Major League Baseball continue to claim that they are in favor of competitive balance, and that's what they strive for, when we know that 5 of the last 6 World Series winners have also come from teams that rank top 10 in payroll? So let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the teams are going too far. I mean, I think they're doing what they feel is necessary to win. I mean, I think if you talk to Yankees fans, Hal Steinbrenner's not going far enough, right? So yeah, I mean, I think it's a unique system in major American professional sports. There's no salary cap. There are penalties, for if you go past certain tiers of like a luxury tax. But there are some teams, the Dodgers and Mets specifically, who are less concerned about that. The Dodgers, because they have this sort of preposterous money machine in the form of Shohei Ohtani, who's just really changed the sort of revenue they're bringing in. And the Mets are owned by Steve Cohen, who has a net worth of like $21 billion and can afford to lose money running the Mets, right? Whereas you're competing in a league, with other teams who they also claim they are losing money, but it's not something they feel they can afford to do, because they significantly lack the net worth of someone like Steve Cohen. So you've got this system really that is like, when the Dodgers played the Marlins earlier this year, there was like a $400 million gap in payroll, the most significant, in the history of the sport. And I think that, you're seeing kind of teams pushing the bounds on both sides. And, I think everyone in baseball agrees that this is probably not a great system. How you want to fix the system depends on whether you side with labor or with management. The union believes that the teams on the bottom should be compelled to spend more, and there should be, a floor. And the owners, you won't believe this, they would prefer a cap, and the teams on the top spend less, right? And so, and that's kind of going to be what is potentially at stake, when there's another labor stoppage after the 2026 season.
I wanted to ask you, you were talking about some of the discrepancies between the Dodgers and some of the other teams in the league. How can an owner sell to his fan base when they're not out there spending money on players, bringing in free agents and whatnot? How can they sell to their fan base that they are trying to be competitive and win? Because, you look around the league and you see all these other teams out there spending money, and it gets discouraging if you're a fan of one of those teams who isn't doing that. You mentioned in your story 9 teams this year who did not offer a multi-year deal to anyone this offseason. That can be tough. I think about teams like the Pirates. They were lucky enough to win the lotto and get a Paul Skeens, but they have done nothing to build around him. How do you sell that to your fan base?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 ways that a baseball team can demonstrate to the public that they are trying to win. One is actually winning, right? So teams like the Tampa Bay Rays, who don't spend a lot of money but have historically been quite good. They are trying to win in a fashion that works for them. The Milwaukee Brewers, the Cleveland Guardians, these are all, successful small market teams that tend to be involved in the postseason every year. The other way to demonstrate to your fans that you are trying to win is by spending money, is by bringing in players and by, doing a public facing investment in your team, not just saying, hey, we're, building up our infrastructure, or like we're increasing our R&D, all this sort of stuff. That is stuff that eventually will become apparent on the field and you need to start winning. But in order to demonstrate, hey, we are trying to win, the way to do that to the public is to sign players or trade for players or extend your star players. And teams like, the Pirates are not doing that, and I think that something that, if you're a fan of the Dodgers, the Mets, the Yankees, the Atlanta Braves, basically these are the teams that over the past decade have been the most successful, right? What they would argue is, when folks from smaller markets complain that the system is unfair, what they would say is, well, the Dodgers and all those other teams do not have access to players like Paul Skeens coming out of the draft. Sure. Because the draft rewards teams for losing. And when you don't lose, you don't end up picking in the top 5 or 1-1, as the Pirates did. And so from the Dodgers perspective, from the Mets perspective, they're never going to get Paul Skeens when he's 23 years old. They're going to have to wait until he's 30 and maybe, who knows what his arm looks like at that point. So from their perspective, they are just playing, they're using their advantages in a system that disadvantages them in a variety of ways in terms of accessing the most valuable type of talent, which is young superstar level players who are still on rookie contracts.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because when you look at the flip side of a team like the Pirates, you have some organizations like the Phillies and the Padres who not too long ago were basement dweller teams. Yep. They've changed the philosophy and the mindset a little bit. They've spent some more money. They haven't been afraid to go after big stars, and things have really turned around for them. They're in the playoffs or contending for the playoffs year. Attendance is among the best in Major League Baseball. So are there lessons to be learned for a team like Pittsburgh and some of the other teams not willing to spend as much by looking at the model of the Padres and the Phillies?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you laid it out pretty well. Both those teams were terrible for like a decade or more. Peter Seidler, the owner in San Diego, and John Middleton, the owner in Philadelphia, basically, decided that they no longer wanted for that to be the paradigm. And it started in the same winter with, that both teams gave out $300 million contracts, right? The Padres signed Manny Machado, the Phillies signed Bryce Harper, right? At a time when, for some reason, the league was not interested in these two, Hall of Fame track players. But that's, another discussion for another day. Anyway, so like they both built up these teams that are real contenders, that are in the postseason. In San Diego, attendances that are sold out every night. In Philadelphia, they've revitalized the brand within the city. And so if you are a team of the Pirates, the Reds, or some of these other clubs that are just kind of scuffling along, that is what you want your ownership to do. It's kind of max it out, and you invest in the product and the people will invest in you. The counter, though, when you present that to folks on the management side and folks, from the commissioner's office, is they will point out that the Padres had to take out a loan to make payroll. That the Phillies sold a big chunk of their equity last year to deal with, to handle some debt and to pay off some stuff. And so in terms of like the pure running of a business, that's not maybe the best way to go about things. Then you get into the deeper argument of like, okay, what is the point of owning a baseball team, right? I think all fans would say, well, so you can win a World Series. That's I've never been a billionaire, so I don't really know how to do that. But that is not how all of these guys think. They will all say that they are trying to win a World Series, but they are also running a business. And so that's where, while you can look at San Diego and Philadelphia as the blueprint for what you should do if you're like a lower revenue team, they will make an argument that this is actually, this could be a cautionary tale of, what could happen to your good business, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, when you look at what the Dodgers have done in the last couple of years, bringing in Ohtani and Yamamoto and now Sasaki this year, they're not breaking any rules. Okay. They're not doing any of that. That's not what I'm getting at. They are kind of utilizing or strongly utilizing the deferred money option, maybe more than any team that we've seen. Do you have any problem with what they've done? And do you feel that it's kind of disrupting the competitive balance in baseball?
No, any other team can defer money. Max Scherzer's still getting deferred money from his Nationals contract that he signed in 2015. I mean, like, the Dodgers are benefiting from creating a juggernaut. They have been the best team in the sport for a decade, and players want to play there. So as part of that, players are willing to take less money to play there, and they're willing to accept, deferred contracts to do it. And so it allows the Dodgers to continue, to basically to pump money into their sort of roster while not having to pay the full freight right now. I mean, look, like, it's probably in a real sense, whoever was going to sign Shohei Ohtani for that contract where he's being paid $2 million a year over the 10-year length of the contract, it was going to be an unfair advantage, right? The Dodgers, though, created the environment that Ohtani chose to go to. He could have gone to San Francisco on that contract if the Angels decided they didn't want to defer money, so whatever. But, like, he could have gone to Toronto on that exact contract. He could have gone to the Yankees or the Mets or any team, on that exact contract, and it would have provided an unfair advantage. But the Dodgers are being rewarded for making themselves a destination, so that Blake Snell wants to go there, Roki Sasaki wants to go there, Yoshinobu Yamamoto was willing to turn down more money from the Mets to go there. They're where players want to play.
Yeah, fair enough. All fair points. I can't disagree with any of that. But do you think, as we're going to get into the CBA here a little bit and the possibility of a salary cap, it seems like over the last couple of years, we've heard more and more and more talk about a salary cap. At least in my opinion, I could be wrong about that.
No, definitely.
Is it fair to say that part of that reason is because of what the Dodgers have done?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's twofold, right? It's because the Dodgers are, like, pushing it into the red in terms of what they can do. They have the pedal down and are doing everything they can to try and take advantage of this competitive window and this time when they have this money machine in Ohtani. And I think it's because so many other ownership groups have effectively thrown up their hands and been like, well, we can't compete. We can't sign these guys. And so, like, is the reason people are talking about a cap because the Dodgers are spending, $1 billion, or is it because 9 teams are not giving out multi-year deals? Right. Like, I think both things are true, and they're not unrelated. But, like, your perspective on it, again, just depends on, kind of how you see the world. If you think that the money that the sport is bringing in should be parceled out how the owners like it, or if you feel like more of it should go to, the main labor force, which is the players.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. I do want to get into the salary cap talk here. So the current CBA is set to expire at the end of the 2026 season. December, I believe, is the date.
Yes.
So how likely is that we're going to see a work stoppage, and will we see, do you think, in your opinion, the framework of some sort of salary cap in baseball?
So, yeah, a work stoppage very likely. It would be a lockout, as there was after the 2021 season. So the owners would vote to lock out the players as a negotiating tactic to try and, put leverage on them to get the CBA done. I think it would be very challenging for the owners to be able to put in a salary cap basically cold in one negotiation. You have to understand that, like, from the Baseball Players Association's perspective, from the perspective of the union, their, like, defining achievement is not allowing there to be a salary cap.
Yeah.
To the point that baseball owners get teased by owners of other sports about not having a salary cap. Like, this is such a significant point of pride for the union, and that they have never bent and they have never accepted a cap. It's very hard for me to see a world in which they acquiesce to that in any form or fashion. If you talk to Scott Boras, you might argue that there already is a cap in terms of the luxury tax, but in terms of a hard, can't go past this cap, It's very, very challenging for me to see the players ever accepting that. So then it becomes a matter of, are the owners willing to lose a season in order to get a cap? Are they willing to, go to the mattresses and basically hold tight and not take in all the revenue that they would get in running baseball? Can they manage their business, portfolios? Can they do all the other things that they have going on? Like Steve Cohen can afford to do that. I don't think Steve Cohen wants to do this, to be clear. I'm not suggesting that, but it's like that guy has so much money. He doesn't need the Mets to run his business. A lot of these other guys do, right? And they need the money that comes in through, ticket sales, all that sort of stuff. So are the owners willing to give that up, to with the idea that it would end in a cap? And it's not guaranteed that it would end in a cap. So I think it feels unlikely to me, but we're also pretty far out. And I think what is interesting is that I think neither side is totally unified in what exactly it wants just yet, in part because we're still, more than a year away. But just, me spitballing here, like I'd be pretty shocked if they put in a cap at the end of the 2026 negotiating.
Yeah. Well, luckily for baseball fans, we don't have to worry about that quite yet. As you said, still down the road, but it is coming. So I'm a little bit worried myself. I hope we don't get too long of a work stoppage. So Andy McCullough, everyone, go out there, read his story, Charting the Divide Between the Haves and the Have-Nots on The Athletic right now. Andy, we thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, thanks for having me.